Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. The trailer for Star Trek Generations, if I cared about this movie, I would probably not like this trailer.
I will say,
Please do.
thinking back to the time before this movie came out in 94, seeing Picard on screen with Captain Kirk was exciting. And I know that was something that I was excited about at the time. In retrospect, when you watch it, you realize that they show you quite a bit of stuff that happens. I will say the trailer makes the movie look a lot better than the movie itself is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
A lot more action, adventure,
Substance.
excitement, more captain stuff.
Yeah. Not as much brooding. Oh, there's a lot of brooding. Everybody's brooding.
Oh, yes, there are.
The story itself has precious little substance to it, and we'll talk about that. But because of that, I think that, the trailer cutters were definitely, stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Because they're having to manufacture excitement and exhilaration out of where there isn't. And in that regard, I think they did a fine job. I think they probably reveal too much. I think that's also probably the style of the time. And I'm with you. I think when I first saw this trailer, I was probably pretty excited to see all of the great captains on screen. That's great. And I was excited because the show, the TNG, had been on the air, and I knew these characters so well. I was excited to just see them on the big screen. That was a great thing.
This was right on the heels of their full 7 seasons. So it's anyone who is a fan of the show. And I know this show is really where my Star Trek interest picked up. It got me really excited. It's like, this is the chance to now take that step and see them in the next phase of their journeys. And I was quite excited.
It reminds me, watching the trailer again, that I was not thinking very critically about the story itself when watching the trailer. And I just sort of let it wash over me. It was good. It met my needs. And I probably moved right on. And seeing the movie and then going back and watching the trailer, especially in the context of all the movies we've been talking about back to back, I realized just how many. It feels like just weird shortcuts, a hodgepodge of TNG stuff, just sort of jammed on screen, and it's not really representative of the Trek that I wanted to ultimately see on screen. But I think, to your point, I was probably right there with you. Excited to see all the captains on screen and ready to Trek out.
But you have to be a little disappointed, Pete, that the trailer does not feature Data singing about finding life forms. Oh, little life forms, oh, little life forms, where are you?
In a distant corner of our galaxy, a secret observatory is attacked. A brilliant scientist is found, and a mysterious ribbon of energy where past and future collide is unleashed.
It's a doorway that we call the Nexus.
Every ship which has approached the ribbon has either been destroyed or severely damaged.
Obviously, they were looking for something.
There's still no indication of why they attacked the station.
I must return to the observatory immediately.
There's nothing I can do.
Timing is very important in my experiment. I have an appointment with eternity, and I don't want to be late.
Soren doesn't care about weapons or power. He just cares about getting back to the Nexus.
The star is going to collapse in a matter of minutes.
That'll destroy everything in this system.
Population?
230 million, sir.
Why would he destroy a star? I have to stop him, but I can't do this alone. I need help.
I know someone who can.
You say history considers me dead. Who am I to argue with history?
You're a Starfleet officer. You have a duty.
I don't need to be lectured by you. I was out saving the galaxy when your grandfather was in diapers.
Now, the torch of adventure is about to be passed.
Eliminate them.
This is The Next Reel, everybody. I'm Pete Wright, and that right there is Andy Nelson.
Hey, hey, hey.
And we spoil movies. Tonight on the show, David Carson ushers a new Trek cast to the big screen with his 1994 film Star Trek Generations. Before we get into that, you should learn more about us at thenextreel.com. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, or follow us on Twitter and Facebook at The Next Reel.
And if you are a regular listener of the show and you're interested in supporting our ongoing work investigating great film, please consider a regular donation through our Patreon page. You'll get to join our back channel conversations on Slack, listen to the members-only weekend show, and get better chances of being a part of our Listener's Choice episodes. Just head over to patreon.com/thenextreel.
All right, Andy. I don't like this movie, and it hurts my feelings. I take it deeply personally on the heels of such a great experience with Star Trek VI. I love the Star Trek VI so much.
So here's a question for you, and I really had to think about this question quite a bit after finishing this. Is this film any different in quality from Star Trek V: The Final Frontier? And if so, what makes it a different experience?
Well, that's a great question, and I think I have a position on this. I feel like Star Trek V is a much more approachable film just visually. It attempts to do more things more interestingly. I think Shatner is a stronger filmmaker than David Carson.
Well, I definitely agree with you there. David Carson left little to be desired with his directing abilities. I mean, I shouldn't just out and out poo-poo the man as a director, but I did find watching this and looking at his filmography in the TV series as far as Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and everything. He is kind of, for me, he feels like a TV director. I feel like he's had a lot of exposure directing TV series. And watching what he did here feels like he did not have a good understanding of how to expand it into something that felt more cinematic.
Right.
It felt very staid. Even though he had a fantastic cinematographer on board, everything felt much more controlled than I think it needed to be.
Yeah, I think it was not bold, right? It didn't take any risks. It even with the resources that it had, and the sets looked largely good. The ships looked great. I really felt, and this is this particular Enterprise is not my favorite Enterprise. I think it looks way too squishy. So but even so, I think the effects, the model effects were terrific. It looks beautiful and substantive. And even if I don't like the shape of it, I certainly like how they used it on screen. So there are some things in this film that need to be sort of celebrated. Like it looks generally pretty good. It just doesn't feel like it has substance. But the problem for me, it's a script problem.
This film has a lot of issues. I feel like if you count the number of issues this film has, balanced with the number of moments that I really liked, I think it's kind of on par with Star Trek V. It actually is, as far as like the number of good moments versus the number of bad moments. The difference for me is that this one feels very, and I guess it goes back to kind of what we were just saying about the director. It feels very narrow. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of scope. It feels like it's riding along that average, the line of average, pretty well. And yes, there are some moments that kind of tip into cool moments. There are some moments that tip into not so cool moments. But on the whole, it never spiked to say, wow, that was a really great moment, or wow, that was a really awful moment. Well, I maybe want to disagree with myself on that one.
Yeah, you should disagree with yourself.
Yeah, but it never had any moments that is like, wow, that was a really great Star Trek moment. And Star Trek V does have some of those moments. I think that the story itself has some interesting points that hit really nicely.
Well, and I want you to talk a little bit about Ron Moore and and the efforts that they went, and Brannon Braga, and the efforts that they went through to try to get what they had in their head on screen, because I think they had a challenge that they were that ultimately was insurmountable.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of the issues, I also say, comes from the story, and these two writers, and Rick Berman, who was on board as kind of helping craft the story with these guys, they had an interesting concept, I think, in the Nexus. But unfortunately, and even listening to the two writers talk about it, they never were really able to get it to mesh into kind of what they were trying to do. And I think that in the end, I think that the Nexus ended up winning. I think it took down the writers, and it didn't. They weren't able to kind of get a hold of it and tame it into something that they needed it to be in the context of the film. To that end, hearing them talk about their idea when they first started thinking about the story, and I think it was Brannon talks about how he always sees the poster first, and he saw this poster of the two Enterprises battling each other. And it's like, that's an amazing idea. How can we make that work? And they were never able to make that work. Now, I have to argue and say there's bound to be a way to make that work, and they could have very well done it and made such a great film out of it. Unfortunately, they got stuck with this really frustrating idea of the Nexus that I fight with every time I watch.
I guarantee you that movie with the two Enterprises fighting each other has no space ribbon in it. I guarantee you there is no space ribbon. I think what they ended up with is a story that has no stakes. I mean, this is the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, if Indy had not interjected himself, we'd be fine. He'd be in the Nexus. Nobody would have been like, if Kirk had not done anything, the Nexus would have taken Soren, and he'd be in his happy place. And the Nexus itself would keep flowing through space, just as it is at the end of this movie. Nothing is resolved. Nothing is resolved, and they don't seem to care that nothing is resolved. They're just are they now tracking the Nexus? Are they going to go follow it to the next planet, the next lunatic? Nothing is resolved. It's just it is a ridiculous plot with manufactured stakes that I just don't think live up to the raw material that they're working with here. And it was really frustrating. And Malcolm McDowell, his needs, right? This is the putty that they're working with here. His character's needs are so deeply personal and irrelevant to the mission of the Federation. Right? I mean, like they are. They could have just let him go.
To that point, though, I do say I like the idea that this was a guy who was willing to destroy star systems and, I mean, take out millions of lives just to get back to this thing. Did they hit that point home well enough? Not at all. And it was just the story, the antagonist, his logic, everything just seemed kind of lame. And it was really, I don't know, it was just very frustrating. And I guess I was a little confused also at the beginning of it. Was he one of the people on those ships along with Whoopi Goldberg?
Yes.
So okay, so then we go into this whole thing.
He was rescued. He was pulled out of the Nexus.
But we get this as Guinan brings up later. I think actually it's in our deep scene dive. We have Data saying no ship has ever made it into the Nexus and that didn't blow up, basically. But they were in the Nexus. Does that mean that their presence within the Nexus would have been destroyed the minute that the ship blew up?
Okay.
I guess I didn't understand. It's like, wait a minute, what?
I love that you bring this up, and this is yet another reason why I find this incredibly thin. The maniacal genius of the ribbon of the Nexus. If the Nexus comes to you, you get everlasting peace in your happy place. If you come to the Nexus, you turn to embers.
Is that how it works?
That's how it works. So when the Nexus whipped up and hit the Enterprise B and destroyed that piece of it and that front deflector array, and Kirk was taken, that was the Nexus reaching up to him, so he got to go to his happy place. Had they just flown the Enterprise into the Nexus, nobody would have been in their happy place. That's what I think their internal logic is.
That is absurd.
So, and that's why when you see those ships, when you see those ships, they're facing away from the Nexus, right? They're facing away. It's like they're not flying into it. I can't even. It's so? Why are we having this conversation?
No, go on. This is great.
It's ridiculous. It's so stupid. We're going to jump forward because Guinan obviously was rescued. She had been in her happy place. Somehow she came out and is now, 73 years later, and is now on the Enterprise D, and she is not a lunatic. Maybe that's because she's still also in the Nexus.
Yeah, right.
Why do they want us to wrap our heads around such a ridiculous leap that we all have to buy into this? I can't do it. He needs, why, Andy? Stupid.
And then when they get out of the Nexus, unexplainably, and they position themselves at a kind of the perfectly timed period to make the plot work or accelerate in a theoretically quote unquote exciting way.
The Guinan Echo is all powerful. She could just send you where you need to go.
Okay, so then now they're back on the planet fighting against Soren, but where is the other Picard? Because wouldn't there be Picard 1 there also?
You would wonder. Was he crushed under the rocks that crashed down upon him when Soren shot down and all the smoke, the dust came up and we didn't see him? Is that where he went? What is going, what? Stupid.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I think Braga and Berman, they get a lot of, they get a lot of blame for doing things with Trek, for taking over sort of leadership of Trek and doing things with it that are just, that aren't Trek. And I disagree with that. I really think under they shepherded in a lot of great ideas in the Star Trek canon.
As writers, though,
yes.
right? Not
writers and showrunners,
showrunners
for Voyager, and I mean they've been around a lot of series, right? And so I think they get a lot of flack for it, and I think a lot of that is heaped on them because of this film. It's silly, and I certainly recognize I don't have a multi-million-dollar feature credit to my name, so it's really hard for me to like just continue to lob crap at it. But it was not a good audience experience for me, and it made me angry. I did not get this angry at Star Trek V. Right. I didn't get this angry. I was puzzled. There were some things that were kind of dumb and didn't hold up very well. It ultimately, for both of us, came out on this viewing as a 3-star movie, right?
Yeah.
This film is not that for me, and on watching it again, it becomes more ridiculous. Asked us to do so much more, and I think the problem is I take this personally because I actually really like these characters. I really do, and I think they do things in here that are just ill-advised, that lampoon the character. I don't come to Star Trek. To a Star Trek major motion picture, the first time I get to see the next gen cast on the big screen, I don't do that to come see them, doing a promotion ceremony on a ship at sea in the holodeck. I don't come to see them do that, and it's poorly written. They put words in these characters' mouths that don't befit the character, and it's just silly. And to open the first Next Generation experience with this cast in such a ridiculous vaudeville fashion, I think, is unforgivable. I think they just missed a huge opportunity. And in fact, I think if this movie had been better, we would probably have more than 4 Next Generation cast films. Like this movie, it was not that great, and it didn't set the bar high enough.
Well, so here's a question for you. Star Trek The Next Generation seemed to have a lighter tone often than the original series. Not all the time. I mean, certainly they had some episodes that were, thrills and exciting and everything. But on the whole, my memory of it, and I haven't gone back to rewatch it like you have, but my memory of it was that it was always a little bit lighter in tone. And I don't know if that's because Roddenberry kind of came back to the fold and really wanted to impart his vision again into the series. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't a lot of the elements that they're pulling into this film like specific things that they're pulling from the show, like Spot the Cat and the emotion chip and just kind of just things like that just for me become really kind of sticking points of bad comedy and just treacly emotion that just don't work at all. But I mean, they're kind of there, aren't they?
Yeah. 2 points to that. First, you got to remember, we had 178 episodes of the TV show to explore these concepts, both funny and dramatic and heartbreaking and interesting and compelling and thrilling. Like, we just had a lot more real estate to play with over time to do these kinds of things. And when I hear you say that, I think that the problem is they felt like they needed to jam all of the most popular laugh lines and elements that are, the key elements for each of our major characters had to be just shoehorned into this movie, paying too much attention and too much attention to the tradition of the TV show and not letting the movie be the movie.
Well, I think that's absolutely a problem that I see, is that they felt they had to, placate the fans. They had to do fan service and go, hey, you love TNG? Here's more TNG, but bigger and better and funnier. Yeah. That really does feel like what they were trying to do here. Instead of saying, hey, we now have the opportunity to tell a story, like a good story for TNG, but just on a bigger canvas. Like, what if they had, and we'll talk about that next week. I was going to say, what if they did a really interesting Borg story? I'll save that point for next week. But what if they had taken a story that was even just hinted at, or characters that they had only just lightly explored? Or what if they just dumped all of that and didn't tie anything into it? They just took these characters on a really interesting voyage. I think that would have been a story that would have made people happy. Again, even going back to the idea of captain versus captain battling the two ships. I mean, find a way to tell that in a story that can work and be really interesting.
And the Next Generation that's like well-trod territory for the next generation, and specifically to next week, which we'll talk about, right? Tying to the show, paying service to the show, and doing it in a way that really that allows you to tell the next chapter of that story on a much bigger and glorious canvas, and take some new risks. This movie takes no risks, takes all of the smallest humor moments from the show, and shoehorns it into a snow globe with a nice, literally fancy ribbon tied around it. You see what I did there?
Yeah, it was very beautiful.
Rapid fire here, Andy. Reusing Star Trek VI's explosion.
What's funny about that is listening to the director talk about it and talking about it as if he actually had shot that. And I don't know if David Carson is just forgetful or clueless or pretending, or I don't know, but listening to him talk about it, he's just like, yeah, oh no, we shot that. It was a great model. It was like 6 feet, and we all went down and we watched it blow up. And I was like, no, I want it to be like bang, 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 like as if he was directing it. I'm like, wait a minute, this is what is he talking about? And I really, and even the person that he's talking with is talking about, oh yeah, it was an explosion so great they used it in multiple films. And I'm like, yeah, this is the film they reused it in, guys.
You were not
I just
first.
watched Star Trek VI. That to me, just again, going back to David Carson as the director. I mean, I don't want to dismiss him too much, but I just hearing that, I'm like, maybe he just wasn't paying attention all that much. I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, no, that was not great. How about this is a ship that needs seatbelts?
I almost feel like at this point, this is like a parody of Star Trek when things happen and nobody's wearing seatbelts. I really just, it perplexes me. And it will continue to perplex me as this series goes on.
It will. And luckily, however, at some point it does get resolved, which I think is even funnier.
I can't wait for this.
Absolutely. And can I just say, and I know this is not, I don't want to get into I don't want to get into a thing like, but seriously, they put Troy in the pilot seat of the saucer section. Mm-hmm. Now I know that this is a thing that upsets a lot of people. It does not upset me because of the old joke, oh my gosh, women can't drive. That is not why it upsets me, and that is low-hanging fruit. That's always where the joke goes. That's not it. When you hear Marina Sirtis talk about this, she talks about how glorious it is that finally she gets to pilot the starship, right? Finally she gets to do it, because she says, here's another red shirt who is apparent who comes in to fly the ship. I'm sitting right here. And then they put another red shirt, and here's another engineer who comes in and fly the ship. Andy, she's a psychologist.
I know.
That's the problem. That is the problem. She's a therapist. She's a psychic. Like, she is not a pilot of the that makes me so mad. And it's, even though I don't like the what. There's another one. They separate the saucer section. That was only the whole Klingon thing. I am sure it's only an excuse to do this great big saucer section separation that we didn't need, right? They give us just such short time with the ship on screen before they blow it up in their first movie. They blow it up. It was unearned, Andy. I am fired up.
I hear you. And I know the saucer section saucer separation was another element from the show that they're like, oh, well, let's do that again. Finding an opportunity to bring it back. So again, it's time and time again. And, for a show that always has done, I won't say always done like right by science, but because obviously it is science fiction and they do have to fictionalize quite a bit. But, for the most part, they're trying to make things seem, somewhat realistic. When Soren launches that rocket to blow up the sun, that thing must fly faster than the time travel warp speed, because that thing hits the sun like in seconds. As soon as it goes up, pow! It hits the sun. It's like, how fast is this thing going?
Yeah,
it takes us from Earth to. I know we're not flying warp yet. But to get to Mars, it's going to be I can't remember how many months.
This is good. No, please tell me more about science.
Yeah, I know. Well, right. Yeah.
But look, your point is exactly right here, because not only does it take just seconds for the rocket to get to the sun, but then it gets dark like instantly. Right?
Yeah.
If they were that close, if that planet were that close to the sun, wouldn't there be some delay in the travel of, light speed, they call it, I think? I'm no Neil deGrasse Tyson, but I'm just saying I would not expect it to be like somebody flipped a switch. And
Right.
if it was that close, then they would be burned up, right? They would not be surviving on that planet.
And if they blow up the sun, because his whole thing is it's to change the gravitational pull of the Nexus. It's like, it doesn't change their gravitational pull. They're fine. It doesn't throw them into space or anything.
And all of this happens while the Nexus is in view. They can see it. They can see it, Andy.
Oh, dear.
I am not a scientist, but I know space doesn't work that way.
It's funny. With all of this, I wrote down a note. Why is Whoopi Goldberg not credited? And I think we just answered the question. She probably, you know what? Maybe I don't need my name on this one.
Maybe they won't recognize me. Okay, so you have I notice in our notes you're highlighting some things. You want to specifically talk about them? I may have answers. They might not be good.
Well, I want answers because I know that you're more the Trek nerd than I am. And these are questions that genuinely perplex me with the series. And I'm trying to figure out the answer because, okay, so several times, I think at this show and even the last show, I think both of the captains say, get us there, maximum warp, which sounds really fast. Like put the pedal to the metal is basically what they are saying. Yet in Star Trek 4, they're going, you'd think that they'd have to be, going under maximum warp because they're going warp, 5, warp 6, warp 7, warp 8.1, 0.2. Like they're counting up to warp, and the ship is vibrating, and it's like things are going to fall apart just to do this this time travel thing.
Yes.
What's the difference between those warps, which seem less than maximum, and maximum warp?
Well, the way I understand it, if you look at the warp. Actually, I'm on the warp factor table. There's a warp factor table which will tell you, and the ships and their capabilities of warp factor. And in fact, there's a wonderful YouTube video that actually does the real time, like if it puts a little table with all the little ships and their warp capabilities and like has them do a race to Venus. So you can see how fast it would take the Voyager to get to Venus and how long it would take the Enterprise NX-01 to get to Venus, which is from Star Trek Enterprise, which is a warp 1 capable ship. Maximum warp, when they say maximum warp, that means that you are going essentially the manufacturer's recommended maximum warp capability for the engine. That is not the same thing as the theoretical maximum that the ship is capable of, right? So even though, they may say that your BMW is capable of 160 miles an hour, I don't know, it's probably one that goes that fast. Maybe in a stiff tailwind down a steep hill, it can go faster than that, and pieces might start falling off of it. That's what you're experiencing there. And so the Enterprise D, I think, is 9.975 or something. Or no. It's actually less than that. It's like 9.7 or something. And the Voyager is actually, that whole class of ship is smaller with bigger engines. It's capable of 9.975, and that's one of the fastest ships. And then they get into, like, the Enterprise J is this ridiculous theoretical maximum that they never actually talk about. So.
Like you hit it, and then all of a sudden at the other end you pop out and everybody's baby, sort of thing.
Yes, you have just answered your own question. Star Trek nerd question number 2. I'm not sure if I did service to that question at all. Does that make any sense?
No,
did I do okay?
I think it helps. I think it does help.
All right.
Okay, so nerd question number 2. So, these ships are huge. They clearly hold a lot of people. Are there civilians on the ship, or is everyone kind of an employee in one faction or another? I know in this one we have a whole bunch of kids that pop up. And as I recall in the Next Generation show, there were schools and things. So obviously there are, but then it perplexes me because I'm like, okay, but aren't they, like, these guys are going into battle. There's Klingons attacking them. Is that just the nature of living on a ship in space, or is everybody an employee?
So this is actually a great question, and it's different. This is one of the major changes from the original series to the Next Generation, that the Enterprise D is huge, right? It's a massive ship and has this crew complement of over 1,000 crew members, and that includes civilian residents and their families, right? Because of the way the Federation works, everybody is an employee of the Federation, and because presumably the Enterprise is a research vessel, it's also the flagship of the Federation, and so they actually host families on this ship, and it's like overseas military duty, right? Where you go to work for the Department of Defense as a teacher, and you're placed in a base in Germany, and your kids go with you, and your spouse goes with you, and they may work for the civilian complement of the base, or they may not. Well, that's the model that they were going for when they introduced the Next Generation, that for these big ships, they're going to need people to support the family element when somebody is a crew member. They bring their spouses, they bring their kids, and they have to take care of them.
Huh, okay. So in the original ones, like when they go off to fight Khan, it's just 50 crew members and that's it on the ship?
So the Enterprise D that we just talked about has a crew complement of 1,014. The Enterprise A, Enterprise D was Galaxy class, much, much larger ship. The Constitution class is the 1701, which has a crew complement of just over 400. And so it's a significantly smaller ship. It is puzzling, though, that even in a crew complement of 400, that the captain always has to go.
Yeah.
There are only 7 people who really get involved in any sort of action. What do the other 393 people do? I don't know. But that's not a question that we're supposed to ask.
So how many people are living and working on Enterprise D again?
1,014.
Because then I was like, well, how does that equate to the Death Star? Like all these people getting killed in these battles in space. It's like, geez.
Yeah. And the Death Star is significantly
it's in the hundreds of thousands,
larger. Yeah. On the
it's a moon. It's a small moon.
It's no moon, Andy. It's a space station. It has a crew of 265,675 plus 52,000 gunners, 607,000 troops, 30,000 stormtroopers, 42,000 ship support staff, and 180,000 pilots and support crew.
That's a lot of people.
And that was from the New Hope era Death Star. That's not the Jedi Death Star was much, much larger, and Starkiller is much, much larger, obviously, than that. What do you think? What do you think about that? Just whipping out those numbers.
I love it. It's frightening, these statistics that you have just sitting around.
Let's see. What's that? You got anything else? Give me another nerd question.
I think I don't have any other nerd questions. Well, here's one for you. What does Data cry? Does he have special
like
glands,
a saline
planted in his eyes that allow him, if he gets emotions, this will allow tears to come out of his eyes?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes. I don't know what the actual substance is, but I know that I mean, this is and this is part of the problem, I think, with this whole narrative. And then I'm going to shut up so we can talk about, Deep Sea Dive. This whole narrative of Data and the emotion chip is predicated on a storyline that is really rich and allows Brent Spiner to do some really fun stuff on screen, right? I mean, there are like 6 or 8 episodes that this pulls from directly and a whole lot more indirectly that all lead to this emotion chip. And they managed to try to jam all of the sentiment in the emotion chip in a 3-minute sequence with him and Geordi. And it's really frustrating because why it's fusing to his neural net, why it's not working, why is he doing this kind of weird laughy thing all the time, and then what is he crying? Why does his makeup not run? Right? All of these are huge questions, and we don't get a chance to really explore them because it requires a knowledge of the show that I think is unfair to expect for a mass market cinematic audience.
Well, and I think that speaks a lot to the balance that the people behind these films needed to strike between making a film that was something that fans only would really understand and click with, and something that the general movie-going audience could actually go and enjoy. I don't think, my impression is that they weren't really making something that just a generic movie-going audience could actually go sit and enjoy. I think they made a film that's like, oh, this is going to be for fans, something that the fans will really get into. And to that end, I think they did themselves a huge disservice, because it's not a film that, you could just take a friend to who knows nothing about the Star Trek universe, because they're going to be like, why? What's going on? Who is this guy? And I think that's a problem I feel that the next generation films are going to run into time after time that we'll be chatting about.
I look forward to that. And I think you asked that a central question here. Are there any next generation movie fans? And I assume that the rest of that sentence is compared to the original series Trek fans, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are Star Trek fans, and I think that there are fans who really love the Star Trek shows, the Star Trek films. But in context of all that, are there ones who are like, oh, the next generation movies are just they're the best, they're so funny, I just love everything that's going on in there, and might appreciate them more than the original films? I've never met somebody, but I'm just wondering.
Well, we don't hang out with younger people, right? I imagine those people who only knew the Next Generation were very excited and puzzled about who the hell Captain Kirk is when they saw this movie for the first time, right? I mean, that they just don't have that same shared experience. If you were born in a certain time, this is your movie. Just like there are people whose entire Star Trek experience is Star Trek Voyager, and Janeway is the captain, the oh captain, my captain of the Star Trek series. And I think that is a really legitimate position. It's a good show, but there are people who say that over the original series because they just haven't seen it. So I find that really interesting. I know my kids are that way. They're Voyager kids all the way.
That's interesting. No.
Over the others. Yeah. Deep scene dive, Andy. Set it up.
Yeah, we are talking about the scene that is Data and Picard in the Stellar Cartography room. It's a beautiful scene. They have learned a little bit more about this Nexus, and Picard has asked Data to meet him despite the fact that he's, having emotions. So they go and meet in Stellar Cartography to talk about this Nexus, what it is, where it is, and what possibly Soren could be up to.
According to our information, the ribbon is a conflux of temporal energy which travels through this galaxy every 39.1 years. It will pass through this sector in approximately 42 hours.
Yes, Guinan was right. She said that Soren was trying to get back to the ribbon. Now, if that's true, there has to be some connection with the Amargosa star. Data, give me a list of anything that was affected by the star's destruction, no matter how insignificant.
Stellar Cartography, first of all, I think the part of the reason I like this scene is because I really like the set. This is one of the major sets that we're introduced to on the film that is a massive change from what we had on the show. Stellar Cartography in the show is a room with kind of a globe, like it's a series of atlases. And it's all on paper. It's very strange. It's more like Hogwarts. And here we have this beautiful giant, like in the round sequence. It looks much more like Cerebro from the X-Men, which is fantastic because here we have, Professor X walking out on this giant tongue platform in the middle of this giant surroundo, space map. It just looks really cool. So, that's a great setup for me. I mean, it's substantively, it just looks great. It's a treat to watch.
I think that they misnamed it when they called it Stellar Cartography. They should have called it the... what did you say? It was the best. The Surroundo map room or whatever you said. That was... I want that sign on the door. Surroundo map room.
And in the actual sort of LCARS typography would be great. The Surroundo map room.
That would be the
Data,
best.
meet me in the Surroundo map room.
This is a really, for me, it's kind of the high point of the whole film. I mean, just the most amazing set, just the beautiful effects work that they've done, kind of creating this 3D map of the galaxy, which if you think about it, it really is like this is almost how you would have to do it. You'd have to make this big thing that does kind of envelop them because so much of it is on so many different levels. I think they do just a beautiful job of creating the vision of this room. And I just remember watching it in the theater, and it's the thing that has always stood out for me because of just how powerful it is. And just when things shift and it all kind of feels like it's flying past you. This is something that I think would be magical in 3D or VR. It really is just beautiful.
Totally.
set.
And, I have to say, we know kind of what's, and you and I, we watch a lot of movies, right? We kind of know what's possible in terms of, CG effects. And so even though it looks great, I still sort of marvel at how beautiful it is when that red line sort of moves and the gravitational force changes when the planets are added and removed and the zooms they look great, right? They're a treat. But watching the behind the scenes and watching them build this set is when you see just the real sort of like artistry of manufacturing the look of this thing, because the CG is only used when there's a move, right? When either the crane moves and so we have to have a perspective shift on the characters, they'll use CG and the map is CG, or when something in the interface moves, when we zoom in on a planet, for example. But they actually printed the star maps, the full 3-story star maps in these giant luminescent sheets, these one-piece luminescent sheets for each of the major frames. And I've got to tell you, that is amazing printing tech. It's beautiful. It's great. I mean, I don't know. Is it that I'm nostalgic at this point? That
Well, here's the thing that I think for people watching this, I don't think they're going to realize that. I think that, and I think to a certain extent, that's what you want out of your effects, to make it so seamless that you don't even realize where the effect begins and ends. And when they have those printed versions of the map up, and then they cut to the stuff that's moving, it's like I would never have known. I always thought it actually was always just graphically done later. Yeah. After the fact, and to learn that they actually printed it, I'm like, that's really impressive. I mean, they did a really nice job of making it very clean and seamless.
Absolutely. It's one of those mind-blowing things. But so you get past all the veneer here, and what we actually have is a one-on-one sequence with Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner, and their relationship, the relationship between Picard and Data, is a particularly special one in the show.
Data. You all right?
No, sir. I am finding it difficult to concentrate. I believe I am overwhelmed with feelings of remorse and regret concerning my actions on the observatory.
What do you mean?
I wanted to save Geordi, but I experienced something I did not expect. I was afraid. According to our current information, the destruction of the Amargosa star has had the following effects in this sector. Gamma emissions have increased by 0.05%. The starship Bozeman was forced to make a course correction. Ambient magnetic fields...
Wait. The Bozeman. Why would it make a course correction?
The destruction of the Amargosa star has altered the gravitational forces throughout this sector. As a result, any ship passing through this region would have to make a minor course correction.
A minor course correction. Where's the ribbon now?
This is its current position.
Can you project its course?
Captain. I cannot continue with this investigation. I wish to be deactivated until Dr. Crusher can remove the emotion chip.
Are you having some kind of malfunction?
No, sir. I simply do not have the ability to control these emotions.
Data, I have nothing but sympathy for what you are feeling. But right now, I need you to...
Sir, I no longer want these emotions. Deactivating me is the only viable solution.
Part of having feelings is learning to integrate them into your life, Data. learning to live with them.
No matter what the circumstances.
cannot.
You will not be deactivated. You're an officer on board this ship, and I require you to perform your duty. That is an order, Commander.
Yes, sir. I will try, sir.
Sometimes it takes courage to try to... And courage can be an emotion, too. Now, can you project the course of the ribbon?
Their narrative arc over 7 seasons is one where we really get to see him go from not quite being warmed to the idea of the android to having Data be one of his closest confidants and most trusted advisors and greatest friends. And so this sequence actually is one where we get to see it's like a pinnacle of their narrative arc without any of the earned backstory again. When Picard turns around and says, "You are an officer and you're going to handle it." Part of having emotions is, being able to live with it. It's a really special moment, but I think only again if you had the backstory.
I will say, watching this though, I was so impressed with the amount of patience that Picard has in this particular situation. I mean, he's in this situation where he's trying to get this information, and as Soren points out, time after time, by saying time in this film, time is a critical factor in this film. But Picard, Data has these moments where he's like, I can't focus right now. And Picard is such a good listener. I was like, this is really impressive for this captain to take a moment, just a small beat out of this this situation that he's in, to focus on his crewmen and to try to figure out what is going on with him, and give him that time before finally, when Data finally is just like, I can't, you have to deactivate me. And when he gives him that moment, and it's just like a very firm directive. You are commander on the ship, and you will do your duty right now. And just watching Data like really snap to attention in that moment, I was like, this was a really impressive moment between these two characters. I really respected what they actually did in this.
I do too.
The writers, the directors, the actors, everything was really impressive.
No, I absolutely agree. And also, it's coming to it, knowing all of that backstory makes that even more special. I would say I really look forward to talking about kind of a similarly modeled scene in terms of Patrick Stewart's performance next week in his his confrontation with Alfre Woodard. It has a similar arc, if not a similar intensity, and I really love it, and I think it's a testament to his craft as an actor, not just as a guy playing the captain of this particular starship. He is enormously talented, as is Brent Spiner. I've always enjoyed watching these two on screen individually, but watching them together in these little moments, I think, are particularly special in what is otherwise a very frustrating slog.
To that end, so we've talked about that great moment of this scene. They shift as soon as Picard gets Data back on track. It really shifts to the detective work, right? Now we get into exposition. We get into figuring out everything going on with this Nexus.
Enhance Grid 9A. Where was the Amargosa star? Now, you said that when the Amargosa star was destroyed, it affected the gravitational forces in this sector. Now, did the computer take that into account when it projected the course of the ribbon?
No, sir. I will make the appropriate adjustments.
That's what Soren's doing. He's changing the course of the ribbon. But why? Why would he try to change its path? Why doesn't he just fly into it with a ship?
Our records show that every ship which has approached the ribbon has either been destroyed or severely damaged.
He can't get to the ribbon, so he's trying to make the ribbon come to him.
Now we have some incredible visuals to kind of move us through that, but story-wise, does the exposition become kind of a slog to get through, as they try to piece this together, or because of the actors, is it written well? Does it end up being a scene that actually has more going for it than just straight up boring exposition?
Well, I don't think so. I find watching this scene, it reads very much as two scenes, right? I mean, the pivot, the direction change is really fast. Now, I can essentially let go of that because Data is a computer, and there is something in the back of my mind that says, okay, I know he is probably capable as a character. That's an earned behavior, that he's capable of saying, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead and change my behavior right now because I'm a computer and I can do that, even though it's hard and my fans are probably spinning up. God, that would be so funny. They should. I want to recut this whole movie, but this time, anytime it gets hard for Brent Spiner, I'm going to introduce like 1992 circa 1992 era PC fans. You're not laughing hard enough, Andy. This is gold. This is gold.
It's actually really, what would be even better is if it was on the back of his head and it blew his hair up. And so his hair kind of stuck out of the back every time his fans spun off.
Or in his chest, and his shirt just kind of billows.
Puffs. His whole outfit kind of puffs up like those superhero Halloween costumes.
Oh, this is. We should have been in charge of this movie. I should say, as a
who needs more in Braga when you have Wright and Nelson?
I should say, this is an auspicious day because as we're recording this, the Orville has gone. This is the essentially a spiritual and comedic successor. Apparently, I have not watched it yet, but it is on the television, and you should see it. You should check it out before next week and see if you like it. Brent Spiner as Data. I don't even remember. I was so happy about the fans. I don't remember what my point was. What were we talking about?
The exposition.
Yeah. No, it's a pivot, and it happens so fast. He just sits down, and now we're at the computer again. And I'm always a fan of the detective work. I think it's great, but in the context of this shift, of making the shift and not changing the visual context, not changing locations, for me, I'm still sort of verklempt about the dramatic moment that happened so quickly before it. It's tough for me to shake it.
Yeah, it's a frustrating shift within the scene. I think that they handle the exposition fine. It actually doesn't bug me, and I think it's helped by the visuals, like I said earlier. I mean, it's got just amazing visuals as they kind of puzzle through this thing. Certainly, I like their detective work better than I liked Spock's detective work that we had seen in 4 and 6 when he just figures something out so quickly. This worked a lot better for me. But that being said, I feel like it could have used a little more time with that first bit. But
and maybe that's my problem with it, because I can't underscore this enough. That exposition is incredibly important, right?
Oh, yeah.
Imagine the nonsense of this movie if you really don't get it. Right? If you miss that, if you miss what he's trying to do, the rest of the movie falls completely apart. I'm not saying it doesn't anyway, but it is. It's a hugely important sequence, and I think you're right. My problem is just the context of the thing. And so here, thought experiment. You know how I love thought experiments. What if they put the build to Data's breakdown at the end of the sequence? So they let us get through the detective stuff, and he starts freaking out at the end of the sequence after we know what's going on. And then he says, get back to work.
I can't recall. As I recall, we come out of this sequence and we come back into the Klingons and Soren, I think. I know we're kind of at this point of the film cutting back and forth between the Klingons with Soren, and they've kidnapped Geordi, and then this element as they're trying to figure out what to do and where to go. I think that it might have felt a little weird kind of shifting from, because once you get the plot, like you've got the music, Dennis McCarthy's score starts building as the detective work is figured out. And we kind of like all of a sudden now we're leading into the plot, and it's kind of all of a sudden pushing us forward. I feel like if all of a sudden we went into Data having kind of this emotional breakdown, I think it would have almost felt like more of a break than it already is. Because
this is just close your eyes and imagine. What happens is obviously Picard storms out and he says, set course for the Viridian system. And now
maximum
I want you to
warp.
Imagine maximum theoretical warp. Fly the ship apart then. And they just leave Data alone, standing on the tongue of the Surroundo map room with a fake tear in his eye and a fan blowing his hair. Alone.
Oh, wow.
we could have owned this saga.
It would have been great, man.
Production design obviously is beautiful. I have to say, Michael Westmore did the makeup. There are some really fun creature makeup. There's some really fun creature makeup in here. Upgrade to Data's makeup. He has new eyes and better skin, and there are a lot of sort of surrounding characters that have fun faces. I didn't find the makeup overall, especially on the Klingons, as interesting as I did in the Klingons in The Undiscovered Country, but obviously it was much more of a Klingon movie, and so I certainly understand that. I feel like Worf, I've always felt like Worf's makeup in The Undiscovered Country, Michael Dorn's makeup in The Undiscovered Country, was better generally than all of the run of the TV show of Worf, and I think it gets better in Deep Space Nine.
Oh, interesting. Even better than the films?
Yeah, well, and I don't want to comment because I wasn't looking at it that closely, but First Contact, I'm curious. Curious how I feel about it in First Contact. So
this one, this is just a random aside, not a part of our deep scene dive, other than the scene that preceded it. We have Soren, like, I guess he's taken off Geordi's visor, and he's implanting like a little, something in it so they can see what he is seeing, basically. But did you notice that Geordi is like naked? And
yeah.
I'm like, what? I'm like, why does Soren have to strip Geordi down to take off his visor? What is he doing?
And put that big, like, weird leather, like, collar around his neck. And
there was more going on with Soren, I think, than we realized. No, actually, I learned that there was actually a deleted scene where he actually tortures Geordi for information first, and he actually stops his heart and then brings him back to life. As a form of torture. I'm like, well, that's pretty brutal. And I kind of would have thought that would have been a better moment to have in the film than some of the other ones. But, it is what it is.
That I agree with you. I would have liked to have seen that sequence. Did you know, of course, that visor is an acronym?
What? No.
Yeah. It is a visual instrument and sensory organ replacement.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what about those tennis hats that have the little visors on them? Does that count?
No, that doesn't count. It's only this visor.
Oh, wow.
But it is.
It's a specific Geordi visor.
It's the visor that Geordi wears, not tennis visors. Ironically, tennis is an acronym. I'm not going to tell you what it stands for. How about music?
Well, Dennis McCarthy, his music in the scene, I think, is effective as far as kind of helping build the plot tension as they figure out exactly what Soren's doing. Overall, for the whole film, I mean, Dennis McCarthy was brought onto this, just like the director, because they had been part of the TV series, and they had done effective work on the TV series. I think Dennis McCarthy's music is very fine here. It's serviceable. It does the job. The problem I have with it is nothing sticks for me. It feels very like I like his like choral themes that he has for the Nexus and everything. He does a little bit of integrating some of the old themes, not enough if you ask me. But still, it's like in the end, I'm like, it ends up feeling forgettable, just like the film.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it all sort of, at this point, it all kind of blends into the overall sort of musical arc of the series, and I don't have anything beyond the main Star Trek theme that sticks in my head out of this one. Nope. Anything else on the scene in particular that you want to call out?
The only other thing, just talking about exposition and the sound specifically, there is a moment early on in the film when the camera's, I think right as the scene starts, we're looking at the maps, and then it kind of cranes up to the actors. And I've got to say, there's some rough sound editing with Picard and his exposition as he's talking with Data, trying to figure some of the stuff out. And it doesn't look like they changed any of the words or anything with what he's saying, because it's still pretty wide as we're coming in on him. But I just really struggled with some of the ADR as far as kind of when they had him re-record some of his lines. I didn't think they did a great job there. I could hear the change in his audio. I could hear the edits happening.
We should say John Alonso is a cinematographer. He's got some credits.
He's got some credits. This film is beautiful. I mean, there are stunning shots throughout the film that really just made me happy to be watching his work in the world of Star Trek, because, I mean, there's just some stunning visuals. John Alonzo, I mean, just Chinatown. I mean, look at that film. I think that he did some really beautiful work throughout. And then there's the Meteor Man. Yeah. No, he's done some stuff that you could say is questionable, but he has some solid films under his belt.
Well, and that's why I call that out, because this is a sequence that I think is interesting, and I think being able to play with this giant crane and you know, tell this sequence in this space visually, I think it works. I think it really it works very well. The other thing I would add, this is an Enterprise that plays much more with lights. You know, it's not all bright. There are some wonderfully dark sequences, not as dark as we get in First Contact, but you can feel it sort of moving in that direction, and it makes it much more interesting to watch, I think, seeing more of the sort of gobo patterns of like solar flare and solar light coming in and casting fun shadows on the walls. I really enjoy that piece of it.
Well, and the scene when Picard is looking at his family photo album and
Troy comes in.
Yeah. The lighting is just, I mean, it's haunting. It ties into the emotions the characters are feeling. I mean, that really struck me. I'm like, the lighting of that almost brought out more emotion to me than the scene did, because I felt it was a little much, but I really just thought that Alonzo did an amazing job with what the story was trying to tell there.
Other cast and crew to call out.
Yeah, we see Vasquez from Aliens. Is it sad that that's like become more of her name? This is Jeanette Goldstein than her name itself. I just refer to her as Vasquez every time I see her. I mean, I don't know what that says about me. But
and of course, of course, you know how Captain Harriman got his job.
Well, how is that?
They kept calling him. They kept calling him. They kept calling him until he came over.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
That's right. That's what Alan Ruck.
I know.
Funny, right? That was good.
You did a little Ferris Bueller joke there, Pete. Oh,
this is what you get when we record the show earlier, Andy. This is like peak Pete.
It really is. I will say I loved the Enterprise B. We don't get to see it very much, but I was like, I really liked this ship.
I like it. I actually do. I like it much more than the Enterprise D, but it's all okay because we get the Enterprise E coming soon.
We do get the E coming soon. Yes, we do.
Tim Russ also. I have to call out Tim Russ. In addition, Tim Russ is fun to see because he is in Voyager. He plays our Vulcan in Voyager, and we also have I lost his name. Neil, what's his name?
Are you talking about Glenn Morshower?
No.
Glenn Morshower is a guy who I always recognize every time he's in something. He's just one of those faces that I'm like, hey, it's that guy. And for me, it's his role. I think it's in 24 that I always reference because he was my favorite of the FBI friends in 24.
No, I'm not. It's not who I'm talking about. I liked your story, but mine's better. Except for maybe it's not even the right guy.
Michael Mack?
No, I'm thinking of Neil McDonough. Wasn't Neil McDonough sitting in the... Oh, yeah, no, because he was in First Contact. He plays Lieutenant Hawk.
Oh, yeah, you're way off. You're
I'm
a
way
whole movie off.
All right, now let's go back to your guy. What's his name?
Glenn Morshower.
I want to see his face because I want to see if he's the guy that I also have that.
He's totally one of those guys.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
You recognize him from 24? He's that guy
24.
From 24.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what I always
Aaron
think of
Pierce.
When I see him.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was great.
And he's been in lots of stuff, but that's as soon as I see him in everything, he's always like, oh, the guy from 24.
You can't do that to a man with a fire hose, Jack. That's my Glenn Morshower. How'd I do?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, he's not one of those actors that is often imitated in that way. So I think he'd be happy to go, wow, Somebody actually, instead of doing the old Christopher Walken, they did the old Glenn Morshower.
The old Glenn Morshower. I'm cornering the market for Glenn Morshower impersonations. That one guy from 24. Yes. What else do we have? Please move us on.
That's it as far as those guys. But I did want to say the stories about their shoot out in the desert of Nevada, the Valley of Fire. Which I thought was a fine fitting location for the end. I really kind of enjoyed kind of what they did with that particular location. But the stories that they went through to film there, they could not affect the territory of the desert tortoise that made its habitat there. And so they found a way to work it out. They had to like either helicopter stuff into this set that they built way up on top of the mountain. Every single actor and crew member had to like hike up to it. I love hearing stories like that where they actually like hike it all in. They hike the cameras in. They hike the lights in. Everything was hiked in, all to protect this ground tortoise. And nobody ever saw a tortoise while they were filming. I thought that was pretty funny.
It's turtles all the way down. Andy.
Desert tortoise, man.
Tortoises.
It's a tortoise. It's not a turtle.
Yeah.
Get it straight. Get it straight, man.
You wanted to. You were interested in the history of the holodeck,
aren't you?
Yeah, but considering it's the holodeck that made me so frustrated in this movie that it's sort of hard for me to talk about.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You know, I did ask myself though, and going back to our deep scene dive, as I was looking at the deep scene dive, I'm like, couldn't they just walk into the holodeck anytime they want and say, show us the star map, and like
be standing in it? Yeah,
isn't it essentially the same thing?
Yeah, I also, I mean, I have trouble with the holodeck because it feels like the floor should be more treadmill-y.
Yeah, right. Because otherwise they would walk into walls all the time.
Why don't they walk into walls? I have a real problem with that.
Or falling into water and getting wet, you know.
There's much more exploration of the holodeck in Voyager where, you know, because we have a holographic doctor, and the holographic doctor eventually gets a mobile holographic emitter that he wears on his holographic body. And then they install holographic emitters in all the, you know, corridors, and it becomes a whole holographic subplot.
I found the origin really interesting, that it actually came from the animated series, which was done after like a few years, like 5 years or so after the original 3 seasons of Star Trek, the original series, aired. They did that animated series, and that's where it actually came from. I thought that was really interesting. For some reason in my head, they had it in the original series, but I think that it has to be completely in my head because it obviously didn't come from that. But I thought that was a really interesting little tidbit I didn't know about.
That is really interesting. Narratively, like in the timeline, they actually discover holographic technology in Enterprise, obviously prequel, and they run into another alien life form that has on their ships holographic or holodecks, and they take it. And so that's, I didn't know they even talked about the holodeck in the animated series. That is total news to me. Yeah. The Ceruleans have their hollow chambers.
And they're not hollow.
Holla. They're holla.
Holla.
Holla chambers.
Holla.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway.
How'd it do in award season, Andrew?
It wasn't a big award film, if
really?
You can be surprised at all by that. But like I mentioned last week, it still was nominated for Best Sci-Fi Film at the Saturn Awards. As we learned last week with some of the nominees that were up, was it last week or the week before? Some of the things that they're up against, it's like, well, I kind of am not surprised that it ended up getting nominated and maybe winning. In this case, it didn't win. It lost to Stargate. But if you look at some of the other films that it was nominated against, as far as the best sci-fi films of the year, it includes Body Snatchers, which I actually like most of the Body Snatcher films. No Escape, which I don't remember No Escape at all. Do you remember No Escape?
No.
No
what
Escape.
Is No Escape?
Let's see. Ray Liotta, Lance Henriksen, a soldier convicted for murdering his commanding officer, is dumped and left to die on a prison island inhabited by 2 camps of convicts. Wow. Now I vaguely do remember it, but I never thought of classifying it as a sci-fi. So anyway, apparently it is. The Puppet Masters, Street Fighter, and Time Cop. So
Time Cop.
I mean, come on.
I actually, Time Cop I like. But Stargate, I'm not surprised that Stargate ended up winning.
It certainly spawned its own universe.
Yes. But then, and then Whoopi Goldberg was nominated also for Best Supporting Actress, which surprised me.
She must have been peeved.
Yeah.
No.
Don't. I didn't ask for my name to be on the credits even. She lost to Mia Sara, who was in Time Cop. And I didn't even remember that Mia Sara was in Time Cop. And then, of course, over at the Razzies, William Shatner was nominated for Worst Supporting Actor, but he did lose to O.J. Simpson for Naked Gun 33 1/3, The Final Insult.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is an auspicious loss. How did it do when it comes to the numbers? Did it make any money?
Well, there's big crossover between, we didn't even really talk about Kirk's death and if that was a good thing in this. Maybe it's better we don't. But anyway, this big crossover between the original cast and the next gen cast got the biggest budget thus far of any of the films since the motion picture. Still didn't top it, but it had a $38 million budget. Adjusted in today's dollars, that comes to about $61.5 million, which actually puts it in third place for budgets, also behind Star Trek V. The movie was the big November holiday film, opening on November 18th, 1994, opposite the Miracle on 34th Street remake, the U.S. release of The Professional, which we've talked about on the show, and the animated film The Swan Princess. It opened at number 1 in the box office, but quickly dropped to number 2 a week later when Disclosure opened. I remember enjoying that one quite a bit. And then it dropped out of the top 10 after just 5 weeks. While fans were missing the series after its 7 successful seasons on TV, it clearly wasn't popular enough to draw in lots of other people. The movie did go on to make $75.7 million domestically and $44.3 million internationally, giving it a grand total gross in today's dollars of $194.4 million. This gives it an adjusted profit per finished minute of $1.1 million, just ahead, disappointingly, I guess it's fair to say, of Star Trek VI. But it was enough of a success. I know. It was enough of a success to give Next Generation cast another shot 2 years later.
I am flabbergasted.
Yeah.
Gobsmacked.
I know. Even in total gross, it did better than Star Trek VI.
This was, I in terms of closing remarks, I don't need to belabor the point. This is not my favorite Star Trek movie.
I really was struck rewatching this because I don't think I had seen this in very long time. It struck me at how similar or the similarities, I should say, that I saw with this in Star Trek V. But it just, Star Trek V, I found, had so much more going for it than this one did. This one really just left me disappointed with the very generic feel it had, generic to subpar feel that it had throughout.
I agree, and it is so sad that it comes with such, I think, great raw material and great pedigree, and I think it could have been a really fun way to hand off. I don't know if I said this out loud. I just don't think they needed the mashup. I think we could have just said goodbye after a great Star Trek VI and done a new series. I think that was wasted space. I don't think we needed the Klingons. They did not do service to Klingons after a great Star Trek VI and a great way to sort of do honor to the Klingons, making that a real Klingon movie. And I think so. I just think it was just left and right. I feel bad for him trying to shoehorn a lot of different sort of story elements into this thing, but it just doesn't work. And with that, Andy, I think we probably should go ahead and rank it.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel or just swipe over in your show notes on your podcast app there, and you'll see a link to Flickchart. If you tap it, it'll take you right over to this movie where you can rank it just like we're going to do that and see if it comes up against, for example, Wrath of the Titans. What would you do? Generations or Wrath of the... I don't know. Andy, what's our first one?
Well, let's find out. Star Trek Generations or Hot Fuzz? I think that's an easy one.
Well, that's going to be Hot Fuzz, yeah.
Star Trek Generations or The Adventures of Baron Munchausen? Definitely Baron Munchausen.
Baron Munchausen, yeah.
Star Trek Generations or Gone with the Wind? I would say Gone with the Wind.
Boy, this puts me in a hard spot. I can't believe it, but I'm going to say Star Trek Generations.
I can't believe you're going to say it either.
I am stunned I have to actually defend it.
I am too.
Here we go.
All right.
1, 2, 3. Paper.
Scissors.
Okay.
Thank the heavens.
I did my bit for King and Country, Andy.
Star Trek Generations or Marty? I'm going to even say Marty on this one, Pete.
God, Marty's so bad.
It's not. It's just slow. It
was boring. At least this one made me mad, and I stayed engaged.
Engaged.
I'm going to say Star Trek.
All right. Well, let's do it.
Twice you're making me do this. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
Rock.
Paper. Rock. Rock. See, now that worked exactly as it should.
All right. Star Trek Generations or The Last Boy Scout. Here I actually will pick Star Trek Generations.
I will too.
Star Trek Generations or Pritzi's Honor? I'm going to go with Pritzi's Honor.
Pritzi's Honor.
Star Trek Generations or your favorite film about blind people, Blindness?
Oh, Star Trek Generations.
I'm going to go with Blindness on this one.
Oh, man. Andy.
I know. I'm really kind of pushing you, aren't I?
Here we go.
All right.
1, 2, 3. Rock.
Scissors.
Crush you. That is as it should be.
I don't even mind.
Good.
Star Trek Generations or Coming to America? I had so many more problems with that one this time. I'm going to say Star Trek Generations.
Yeah, Star Trek Generations. Wow.
But that puts it at 303 out of 316. That's pretty low. Makes me wonder where some of these other Star Trek The Next Generation films are going to end up if this one is at 303.
Wait a minute. Are you telling me that there are other, let's just say as a prediction, other Star Trek Next Generation cast films you think are worse than this one?
Yes.
Are you really?
This is not what I think is one of the worst Star Trek films. Absolutely not.
I am shocked, sir. Shocked, I say.
Well, it's going to leave a good mystery for people to listen to future episodes.
Andy, I didn't know you hated First Contact that much.
Oh, look at you.
Oh,
little table turning going on.
Well, let's. What does that do for you over on Letterboxd? Letterboxd.com/thenextreel.
I didn't hate this. I was certainly bothered by a lot of elements, but I was just bored a lot by it. I had a hard time ranking it with what that meant, and I think in context of the script and the frustrations I have with the script, I think I'm at 1.5 with this one.
I am at 1.5, and it's watching it this time. Actually, it fell a half star. It's been at 2 stars for a long time, and it's been at 6.14 on my Flickchart rating, and that I just re-ranked it, and it actually ended up at right around the same spot. So I guess I got a lot of movies down in below the 600s that are that I don't like all that much, but definitely on Letterboxd it's a 1.5 star, and I'm not giving it. No, I am good. I'm going to give it a like because it's Star Trek.
Yeah, this one, that's where I'm a little torn because I feel like there are some elements that I did enjoy. And any chance to see Captain Kirk, I'm always thrilled with, even if I was frustrated with them cooking eggs and some of the stuff that they do in the Nexus. I still enjoyed seeing Captain Kirk, duking it out with Soren up on the rocks. And I... As frustrated as I was that the score didn't just really sing to me when Kirk dies, I thought he had a pretty nice death scene. I liked that. There are elements that I do like here, and so I feel like I have to give it a like.
Yeah, I think you have to give it a like. I was torn, but I don't need to make a statement. This isn't political. I will say that the bridge. The mechanics of the bridge, the bridge is on the Enterprise D is all gimbaled, so the bridge was actually moving and tossing people around. And according to Jonathan Frakes, there were actually ejector seats. Certain seats had like an ejector mechanism in it, and so I'm going to credit or this heart on Letterboxd to the actor who was catapulted from the back of the bridge in slow motion over that other guy who took a knee to the head and down onto the lower level. I think that's
and
what
he lands on the captain's chair.
On the captain's chair, yeah. Yeah, that was a good fall. Yeah.
That was quite a feat.
So there you go. That's it, Andy. Where do we go? Where do we go from here? I could not tell you.
Well, we're going to be continuing. Like I said, 2 years later, they were back at it with now Jonathan Frakes at the helm. Everybody does get a turn after all. And we're going to be looking at Star Trek First Contact. This is an interesting one because it really ties in heavily to the show and makes me wonder how people who weren't invested in Star Trek already, what they were feeling it was bringing to the table for them. So a little Borg action, though, next week.
Everybody loves some Borg. And for Patreon subscribers, thank you, Patreon subscribers. We've got the Saturday matinee coming up for Patreon subscribers. You can find out more at patreon.com/thenextreel. And on that show, we have the list. Andy, do you know what we're going to talk about on the list this week?
I think we're going to be doing time travel, some of our favorite moments in time travel. But specifically, we're looking for moments in time travel that have those absurd qualities where you have to go back in time to like a very specific moment to fix something instead of going back, I don't know, maybe, 2 days ahead of something or whatever. Just this kind of specific time travel moments of silliness.
All right. So anytime you go back in time to see William Shatner on a horse, only those movies.
Only those ones.
Okay, there had to be rules. I'll do it. I'll see what I can do.
There always are.
All right, that's it. This was a good conversation, Andy. I have to tell you, though, I'm really glad that I'm finished watching the movie because when the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy,
as Amazon always doeth.
They're so generous. I have a 3-star because the 5 stars, or the 1 stars, I should say, the 1 stars, they didn't deliver. They actually didn't deliver as well as I wanted them to. And the sad part about that is it's mostly because there aren't very many of them.
Well, this goes to my question I had earlier. Are there TNG Star Trek fans? Here they are.
They're all on Amazon. They're all Amazon reviewers. So I take it would you like to start?
I went high. I went with a 5-star by Kevin Teeple, who says, "This is my favorite Star Trek movie with its cool action, interesting message, and Data being silly. Despite making physicists cry, the speed of light is not infinite. I believe it is the best movie of all the movies set in the Star Trek universe. Seeing it on Blu-ray on a big flat screen TV was really fun."
Your performance of that review was exceptional.
Thank you.
It was nuanced. There were subtle tone changes. Data being funny. I could listen to you say that over and over again.
I'll expect a review on Amazon.
I am going to review your performance on Amazon. Mine is a 3-star, not an easy transition from the original cast to the new cast. Not an easy transition from the original cast to the new cast. It felt like a really well-made episode of Next Generation. It's a good movie, but not spectacular. And I think most of that comes from the fact that I was really not ready to say goodbye to you-know-who when you-know-what happens.
Ooh.
Spot? Spot.
Wait, Spot didn't die. That's right.
Thanks, Amazon.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our originals page when shopping for books and movies we've covered.
Just visit thenextreel.com/originals. Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great conversations.
I was so excited for our big Star Trek film franchise series this season. All those movies adapted from Gene Roddenberry's original 1960s TV show.
As a huge fan, I know that you geeked out over analyzing the adaptations.
Absolutely. From the motion picture to the Kelvin timeline films, seeing the Enterprise cruise on the big screen was a dream come true.
Our list of source material isn't just all books and plays. We have the original series in our list of source material. You can rent the episodes to watch and enjoy, and support the show in the process.
For our Millennium Trilogy series, we covered films adapted from the original books that launched Lisbeth Salander, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, The Girl Who Played with Fire, and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest.
As much as I love Fincher's version, the original Swedish versions are the way to go. We also did our Die Hard series in Season 7.
I can't believe Die Hard and Die Hard 2 were adaptations. Two of the greatest action movies ever.
Well, one of them at least. The other is awfully fun, though. We revisited the classic Mary Poppins for our 1960s movie musical series. A spoonful of sugar always helps the medicine go down.
Old Boy was intense for our Park Chan-wook Vengeance trilogy, and East of Eden and Giant were highlights of our James Dean series.
And a fun time travel mind bender with Predestination to cap things off.
Find all the books behind these adaptations and more at thenextreel.com/originals.
Dive into the source material for your favorite movies. Check it out today, thenextreel.com/originals.